This is crazy. Okay, let's just go. Welcome. Today is July 14th, 2017. You are listening to episode 13 of Counterculture. I'm your host, Aaron Lujan. Thank you for joining me. Forgive me for all the technical difficulties. If you were watching on the live stream, this is the very first time I've attempted not to broadcast on Facebook, but to broadcast on YouTube's live feature and Periscope. So right now we're live on YouTube, and I'm blocking my face on YouTube. Literally, guys, this is guerrilla independent journalism in action. I am broadcasting from my phone on YouTube, and I'm using my iPad over here on Periscope. So forgive me for all the unpolished production, but let's get into it, guys. So Vox, many of you may know, is an online video content company that produces videos for millennials primarily, and they just recently released a video titled "Why Donald Trump Jr.'s Emails Change Everything." And this video, at the time that I saw it, was the number 2 trending video on YouTube for that day, which was actually on Thursday. Today's Friday, July 14th. And I'm sorry, on Wednesday it was the number 2 trending video, and as of Thursday, they had over 1,430,000 views. And this video has the gentleman who runs Vox, Ezra Klein, essentially giving a dissertation, if you will, on the issue that many of you have been hearing about and following. If you've been following primarily corporate-run, Pentagon-run media, you will believe that the world is coming to an end. Donald Trump Jr. is committing vicious acts of treason. He's selling out the country, and he is engaging with the Russian government, and there's smoking gun evidence, proof of that. And so the reason I wanted to focus in on this issue today is because it's all based on lies and it's all based on manipulation. So rather than sit here and give you my opinion, what I would like to do is go into the video itself. I'm going to play the audio of the video. If you're watching live on Periscope or YouTube, you'll be able to see it. I'm going to have it right here. And here we go. It's buffering, guys.
I've often wondered what it felt like to live through Watergate.
What did the president know? And when did he know it?
Events have been rushing toward one seemingly inevitable conclusion.
The disorientation, the confusion, the feeling that you don't know the truth, but with each and every day that goes by, knowing the truth is worse than you would possibly imagine. I think I know what it feels like now. We are filling in a picture, slowly, that unfortunately makes a lot of sense. Think back to May when President Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey. Why did he do that? Why did he put his whole administration at risk? Well, he had an answer.
Okay, so let's just stop there. So that's what I'm going to be doing, guys. I'm going to allow Ezra to give his point, and then I'm going to respond with a rebuttal. Why did he do that? Why did Donald Trump fire Comey? Well, if you looked at my last episode, episode 12, I actually spent about 45 minutes getting into this. And the assumption from Ezra and the conjecture by many of the media is that Trump fired Comey because he had something to hide, because he was hiding this Russian secret, this collusion of sorts. Now, it's a presumption that Trump fired that because there hasn't been any evidence presented as to why. We can only assume or speculate the reasons why. And I would suggest that it could have been incompetence. Comey was extremely unpopular with about half of the agents within the FBI because of his handling primarily of the Hillary Clinton investigation, which many in the agency saw it as a slap in the face because she had clearly committed a felony, and yet Comey decided to turn the other cheek and not prosecute. So one could speculate that Trump fired Comey because he didn't do his job and he was very unpopular at the time at the FBI. Another thing that he could have been fired for was the fact that Jeffrey Epstein, Trump was listed as a co-defendant in a case in the Southern District of New York, which ties pedophile rapist Jeffrey Epstein, who, if you want to look into this later, ran a prostitution sex slave ring, and the evidence very well may have been with Comey and the FBI at the time. So one could honestly speculate that Trump perhaps fired Comey to get rid of that off of his shoulders. So for Ezra Klein and Vox to just assume that, or to suggest that the reason why Trump fired Comey was due to the fact that he was firing him to hide Russian ties is merely speculation, the same way I just speculated two other potential options. So right out of the gate, Vox makes an assumption based on speculation as to why he was fired. And then he goes on to say it wasn't the White House initial answer. So he's suggesting there's some sort of contradiction that they're shifting their stories is essentially what was the implication when Ezra said that. Now, if you actually go back to what happened, the initial response from the White House was that the deputy of the Department of Justice had advised Trump to fire Comey, and then Trump later in an NBC interview said that he was going to do it anyways. So it's a little bit of a manipulation to say that, or to suggest that there was shifting stories when the reality is that it was advised to Trump to fire him, and then Trump admitted that he was thinking about it all along. That's not exactly shifting stories. Again, I think just more manipulation from Vox. Let's continue.
Wasn't his White House's initial answer, but he had an answer.
When I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
But now it's clear that story wasn't made up. And what's worse, and what might explain...
Okay, really, he went through that really quick. I already missed it a second time. He said it wasn't made up with no evidence. Just, it wasn't made up, and then he just rushes into his next point. Again, I believe that's a form of manipulation where he just quickly makes a statement that is a huge point, doesn't provide any evidence, and then shifts to his next point, which we'll hear in a second, where he talks about obstruction of justice and risk. And Trump, why would he risk his presidency and then claim that he was obstructing justice?
In Trump's decision to fire Comey, to obstruct justice, to risk his presidency, is that investigation threatened the people he loves most in the world?
Okay, so Ezra Klein says why would he risk his presidency? Why would he obstruct justice? It's only obstruction if you're presuming that there's some collusion. Again, no evidence has been presented. Supposedly this is the story that's to provide the evidence, but Ezra already claims that there was an obstruction of justice. And then he says, why would he risk his presidency? Like creating this doubt in people's mind that, well, he must have fired Comey because he was hiding his Russian ties, because that would be such a reason to risk his presidency. Well, when you say risk your presidency, that's working under the assumption that there was evidence and that he was doing something. Perhaps he fired Comey and took that risk because he didn't care, as we've clearly seen, what the media says about him. He's called him fake news. He said, you're discredited. A recent Pew study showed that trust in the mainstream media is an all-time high. So for Ezra to say, why would he risk his presidency, is really just, again, a self, it's just assuming that there was ties and that he was afraid of the media, when in fact there is no ties and he's clearly not afraid of the media. Let's continue. And play.
Here's what we learned this week. On June 3rd, 2016, Donald Trump Jr. got an email. It's from a British publicist named Rob Goldstone. He was writing on behalf of a Russian businessman, Aris Agalarov, and his son, Amin. Both of these folks had worked with Donald Trump Sr. on the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow, and they'd worked with him on other endeavors.
Emin, wake up. Come on. What's wrong with you?
In the email, which Donald Trump Jr. released on Twitter in order to get in front of the New York Times releasing it, Goldstone says a few interesting things. First, he writes that Aras, the older Agalarov, met with someone he calls Russia's crown prosecutor. That's a term that in other countries describes a lawyer who argues on behalf of the state. Now, crown prosecutor, it doesn't exist in Russia. But just to be clear, the source is later described as a Russian government attorney. And what this person has is a pretty big deal.
Okay, back up. There is no such thing as a crown prosecutor in Russia. That is true. There is no such thing. And he goes on to say that there is a that this was a Russian government attorney. That is a lie. There is no proof. There's never been anything put forth that this attorney, this Russian attorney, is working on behalf of the Kremlin. From 1998 to 99 to 2000, she worked at a prosecutor's office in Russia, checking the legality of certain legislation that was then passed on to their form of the Senate. And then in 2000, she went into private practice. So for Ezra to say, or to call her a Russian government attorney, is actually a lie. So right away, we're into our, I believe, our second lie. And I'm going to back up because I think I missed a point that I wanted to touch on. So let's just back up here for a second.
It's a lawyer who argues on behalf of the state. Now, crown prosecutor, it doesn't exist in Russia. But just to be clear, the source is later described as a Russian government attorney. And what this person has is a pretty big deal. They have, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton. And they want to meet with Trump Jr. and the campaign to hand them over.
Okay. They have incriminating evidence about Hillary Clinton. So that may sound spooky to a lot of people, but the reality is that there's this idea that if you don't follow politics, this may be new to you, and it's important that we understand. It's called opposition research. So if you're running against your political opponent, one of the most common things in political races is to gather information about your opponent. There's firms that their sole existence is to get this information and sell it to political campaigns. So with this spooky music that Vox is running and reading these emails suggests that something nefarious is actually happening, when in reality, this could have just been your run-of-the-mill opposition research. There was some information about Hillary Clinton that would have been beneficial to the Trump campaign. There's nothing wrong with that. Incriminating evidence on Clinton is legal. If you have information about somebody committing crime and you obtain that information, there's nothing illegal about that. It goes on to say that Russia's support of Trump. Foreign governments can support particular candidates. There's, again, nothing wrong with that. The U.S. consistently takes positions in other countries in which candidates they want to support. So to suggest that it's wrong or nefarious that the Russian government was hoping that Trump would win is again perfectly legal and perfectly understandable. What if Russia perceived Hillary Clinton administration to start war with their country? Of course they would want a candidate that wasn't going to start war with them to win. So again, the way that Vox frames this is almost as if it's bad for Russia to have support for Trump. And he goes on to say, what they have is a big deal. Russian government attorney has official documents incriminating Hillary Clinton. And then let's continue.
The most interesting part of the email, though, the one that leaves no shadow of doubt about what was happening, here's the last sentence. This whole thing, the meeting with the lawyer about the incriminating documents, is, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Right there, Donald Jr. is told that the meeting is part of the Russian government's effort to sway the American election to his death. And how does he respond? Does he go to the FBI? Does he ignore the email? No, minutes later, he replies, if it's what you say, I love it.
Okay. No shadow of a doubt what is happening. He just assumes that the Russian government's effort is to sway the election to Trump. Well, number one, nothing came of it. So we now know, as a result of the meeting, nothing actually transpired. So if Russia had set up that meeting to sway the election, it was a wasted opportunity for Russia. Number two, this meeting took place way before the WikiLeaks dumping of these emails, way before the Podesta emails, way before Russia Mania even started. So it contradicts their narrative, because if Russia was trying to interfere with our elections and the primary method in which they did it was hacking emails, this meeting took place beforehand. So it contradicts their narrative if the meeting's taking place before the Podesta emails and before the DNC leaks. Number three, top Trump staffers never even heard of the meeting. Lining up with what Donald Trump Jr. has said, he just recently was on Sean Hannity and gave his side of the story. So the fact that this was something nefarious and big doesn't line up with the fact that the top campaign officials never even knew the meeting was taking place. Number three, it's legal and normal for foreign governments to which I've already mentioned, to have preferences. And Donald Trump Jr. is free to accept opposition research. It may have only been illegal if he had purchased the information, because the law in the books is actually prohibits foreign governments to sell or to provide value or to a U.S. campaign. So the fact that Donald Trump Jr. didn't purchase anything, there was no money exchanged, only just allows Donald Trump to do this freely. There's nothing incriminating about Donald Trump Jr. holding a meeting and looking at information. The crime would have been had money been exchanged, had there been a purchase or solicitation. There was an email that was sent. He took the meeting. By taking the meeting from a private citizen alleging something is not proof of engaging in a crime. If you were to look at the law, it actually requires solicitation, which is the intent to sell. And this was not an intent to sell. And again, nothing actually ever came out of the meeting. What we found out later was that the attorney had no clue about Hillary Clinton or anything. It was actually a disappointment to Donald J. Trump. She was actually there to push her own political agenda regarding some legislation that the previous administration had passed regarding the adoption of Russian children by American families. So a big to-do about nothing. Let's continue.
And he forwards a whole email thread to then campaign chair Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner. They all go to this meeting with the Russian lawyer at Trump Tower. So what does this tell us? What do we learn here? First, we learn that Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort, they all knew the Russian government wanted to elect Trump.
So what? We all knew that the Russian government wanted to elect Trump. As I mentioned twice already, it's perfectly fine for foreign governments to have preferences as to who gets elected. Nothing nefarious.
Next, it tells us all three of these men, they weren't just open to working with the Russian government against Clinton's campaign. They were actively trying to do it. They were taking meetings at a busy time in the campaign, all three of them.
They were actively trying to work with the Russian government. That is a lie. When you receive an email from a private citizen saying, I have some political opposition research, that is a far cry from actively trying to work with the Russian government. That was not from the Russian government. It was not even, it was alleged that the documents could have been originally sourced from the government, but that's very different. Obtaining a documentation from a foreign government is different from actively trying to work with the Russian government. Do you see the manipulation? When a private citizen claims they have opposition research from the Russian government and Don agrees to look at it, it is very different from actively trying. That's a big reach, okay? Collecting opposition research is very different from trying to work with foreign governments. Donald Trump Jr. said, I thought I saw an opportunity to collect opposition research, so he took it. And then he was asked, had you found out that this information given to you would have been for sale, if it was illegal, if there was implications to national security, would you have gone through the proper channels? And he said yes. Whether he would have or wouldn't doesn't matter because it never actually happened. But the fact that he said he would have clears him.
They were taking meetings to try to work with the Russian government. That has not been their story until now.
Are there any ties between Mr. Trump, you, or your campaign, and Putin and his regime?
No, there are not. That's absurd. There's no basis to it.
So no collusion whatsoever between anybody involved with Trump and anybody involved with Russia in the 2016 campaign.
No.
Just to button up one question, did any advisor or anybody in the Trump campaign have any contact with the Russians who were trying to meddle in the election?
Oh, of course not.
Now, Donald Trump says a Russian lawyer ended up having, quote, no meaningful information for them. So his defense is basically he tried to collude with the Russian government to influence an American election, but the Russian lawyer just didn't have the goods.
Okay, Ezra, that's your words, not his. Defense is he tried to collude with the Russian government but didn't have the goods. Those are your words, not his. He never admitted to trying to collude with the Russian government, didn't have the goods. He admitted to looking at opposition research and there wasn't anything of value. So again, you are speculating the motives and then creating a conclusion based on that. And again, that is another form of manipulation and is very dishonest. Let's continue.
So first, that might not matter in a court of law.
The law says soliciting, accepting, or receiving. He solicited, he accepted, he maybe never received it. He violated the law.
But also remember,
Okay. Now, Don may be in violation of statutes that prohibit foreigners from providing something of value that affects an election. That could be illegal, yes, but it does not support this overall narrative that Trump in the campaign was actively working with the government. What could happen, worst case scenario for Don Trump Jr., is that the court is able to prove that under those statutes that he was accepting a solicitation from a foreign government to affect an election, which is a violation, which could be a violation of that statute, but that doesn't translate into actively working with the Russian government. That's actually very different. And to make this, so I will concede that there could be some statutes that were broken, but that would have to be something that would be a stretch. It's not clear cut. It's in the gray area, and if it's in the gray area, we don't have the smoking gun evidence that Vox in the mainstream media presumes to have.
Russia did end up hacking Democratic emails and releasing them in ways and at times that helped the Trump campaign.
A lie. Russia has hacked emails. There's never been any evidence to support that. What there has been evidence of is a lot of the Hillary Clinton campaign working with the Russian government, I'm sorry, with the Ukrainian government, which we'll get into in a second, but that's not covered, which should show you that Vox and the mainstream media are being very dishonest.
We know about this meeting now, which doesn't seem to have been about those emails. But we don't know if there are other meetings, if there's cooperation on other questions. All we really know now is that the Trump campaign was open to. They were actively working towards colluding with Russia to influence the election. We also know that with...
Okay. Campaign was open to actively working towards colluding with Russians to affect election. Taking a meeting with the possibility of getting opposition research from Russian government sources could also simply be just them wanting to get dirt on Hillary. Again, he's manipulating you. He's making assumptions. Isn't it possible what Trump Jr. said, that I took the meeting to try to get dirt on my political opponent? Of course. So for Ezra to just presume that the reason was what he claimed, which is trying to collude with the Russian government, is being dishonest. Again, another example of the media not being fair, but being biased and being partisan. Why couldn't he say it could have been what Donald Trump Jr. said, or it could have been this? No, he speaks to you as if it's fact. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. This is dishonest. Over almost 2 million people have seen this video, and that is a grave sin, in my opinion, to not be giving both sides of the story. Let's continue.
When they were told Russia was trying to help them, did they react with surprise or shock or fear? They said, yeah, let's take that meeting.
Maybe there wasn't shock or surprise or fear because he thought he was having the meeting to get dirt on his political opponent, and he was disappointed because he didn't get any. They actually didn't think this was a bad thing. Again, and this was all before Russia Mania. This was before there was ever any accusation that the Trump campaign was working, neck and neck with the Kremlin. But again, Ezra's being manipulative and dishonest, assuming that the reason that he wasn't shocked or surprised, he's implying that they were just willingly and willful in cooperating with the Russian government and being treasonous and breaking the law. These bad guys. No, perhaps it was because they wanted to get dirt on their political opponent, didn't get any, they were disappointed, and in the words of Donald J. Trump Jr., it was a giant waste of 20 minutes. Let's continue.
It's always worth asking how people involved in clear wrongdoing might have seemed like the hero of the story.
Clear wrongdoing. Again, guilty in the court of opinion. No evidence.
To themselves. Trump and his family, they bought in the most fevered conspiracies about Clinton.
He's arguably the most corrupt politician that we've ever seen in this country, right? I mean, there's no question about it. If Hillary Clinton were elected, she'd be the first president who couldn't pass a basic background check.
She's a world-class liar.
And they likely believe there's information crucial to American interests lurking in her documents.
Okay, so then he goes to say that the Trump family believes in wild conspiracy theories about Hillary Clinton, and they're guilty into buying into this. Yet her crimes are proven. Even Comey, the director of the FBI himself, said that she was guilty of a crime, committing a felony, but we're not going to prosecute because there was an intent. There's been many crimes that we can get into, such as the fact that a DNC operative in January of 2017 who worked at the Clinton White House met with the Ukrainian government at the Ukrainian embassy and tried to aid and assist the Hillary Clinton campaign to damage Trump. This was a meeting actually to specifically hurt the campaign manager, Manafort. This meeting actually took place. There's proof of it. It took place at the embassy in Washington, D.C. for Ukraine. This was a Clinton campaign operative. The media ignores that. So clearly they're showing themselves partisan. They ignore clear evidence of one side engaging in the exact same thing, colluding with a foreign government to affect an election. The Hillary Clinton operative met with the Ukrainian government at the embassy, and it's not a news story. And Ezra suggests that the Trump family and the campaign are buying into these wild conspiracies like they're paranoid, when he's actually guilty of that very accusation. Let's continue.
If they had obtained the emails, or anything else, and proven Clinton dangerously unfit to lead, or revealed that foreign powers had more information or more leverage over American policymaking than they knew, they would have done the country a great service, or at least it's easy to believe how they would see it that way.
They did talk about it. Trump talked about it in the campaign. It was talked about in alternative media, but everybody like yourself ignored it.
What they were actually doing is working with a foreign government to influence an American election. And that's crossing a very serious line.
Serious line.
I wonder sometimes, how hard is Vladimir Putin laughing at us right now? One thing
Very hard.
Russia's involvement in the election is they never expected to elect Trump. They just wanted to sow doubt in America's institutions and in its leaders. Look how easily, look how wildly they succeeded.
They wanted to sow doubt in our institutions. Again, speculation. Again, assuming. This is punditry. This is not news. So if anybody that watched this Vox video thinks that this is some sort of news report providing objective, factual evidence, it is not. I hope that we can see that there's a lot of manipulation at play, and there are outright lies on behalf of Vox and the mainstream media. One of the most alarming things that I discovered that shows the hypocrisy of the mainstream media is the fact that Hillary Clinton signed off to give Russia and Russian companies 20% of our country's uranium, and shortly thereafter, the Russians gave $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. Have you heard of that? Is there a fever pitch over that issue? Absolutely not. I hope you can see that this media has an objective. They have an ideology. They have a mission. And that mission is to obstruct the president and to sow doubt in our institutions, a free and fair election in which a president won. If you don't like the outcome, work towards a solution. Don't lie and manipulate so that we can obstruct this president and get in the way of moving forward as a country. So that's all I got for today, guys. This was episode 13 of Counterculture. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And you can find everything at aaronlujan.com, AARONLUJAN. Be kind to each other and take care.